There's a kabuki comic under every seat. Okay. So Wizard says, like, what panels would you like to do in Miami? And I'm like, well, look, you're going to have Sienkiewicz and David Mack, you know, let's do something, you know, these guys kind of push the boundaries of...
I like the fact that I'm just the last name. David gets the whole...
Well, I gotta do something.
Well, it's the same amount of syllables. You know?
Well, these guys... Well, Wizard said that you two had done a panel before the
That's right,
week,
yes.
so.
Yeah.
And where was that?
It was in New Orleans,
yeah.
like exactly a month ago.
Right.
And we showed up at the table, and Mike Cotton was there to, you know, introduce us or whatever. And we just started talking, and we just ended up having this big conversation the entire time. And he never got a single word.
No, yeah,
in.
we just sort of...
And we just started riffing off like all the projects we worked on, what we were thinking about, and our philosophy of,
exactly,
you know, our philosophy of comics and storytelling. And
that's true. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So what was the best of that? What was your favorite part of that panel? What part of the discussion was your favorite?
Well, I mean, yeah, like, I'm sure that maybe David can remember, but I sort of remembered as literally, like, when we did not get together, we just have conversations like you and I'll do, whatever. So it's like we just riffed on sort of what was in our, you know, transom at the time.
We just finished a project for Showtime. For Dexter, we did a 6-episode animated story for Dexter. You can find it on YouTube. It was called Dark Echo. Just you know, YouTube search Dark Echo Dexter. And then we were in New York, and we met after New York, and we got together. And it was like, has anyone seen the film Waking Life? Where these guys just walking around, constantly moving, and it's all this philosophy. It was like an episode of that where we're walking from point to point in New York, just like. Yeah, in the zone, talking about, like, you're like, hey, you know, what do you think about this idea? And then what do you think about this idea? And we just kept riffing on it.
What was fun was also that, you know, because it tends to be an isolating business where we tend to work by ourselves a lot. But we find out that, you know, as we started talking, when you can end up finishing each other's sentences, or there's, you know, I mean, I felt like a bobblehead doll, you know, like after the end it was like, it's like my head was just, I was just, oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So it was like finishing each other's sentences kind of, in a lot of respects. So it was really, really interesting. So anyway.
I'm taking back over.
Go ahead, man.
But you didn't give me the juice. Anyway, so look, I'm going to go back and put a little historical spin.
Go ahead.
All right. I also like to tell this story. I think I told it once before.
Do I know?
I think I like to tell it. When I went to this school that was like a career school, career high school, and took commercial art, and you had to show a portfolio and audition and interview. And, you know, why do you want to take this course, and why do you think we should accept you at the school, and that kind of thing. This was like way back in the 70s, and I said I want to find new techniques I want to work in comics. I want to find new techniques that have never been used in comics, and I want to expand the medium. And they're like, that sounds pretty good. You can take this course. But, you know, I was stuck in Texas at the time, and in the 70s, you know, kind of before FedEx and faxes had taken over everything, you still kind of had to be in commuting distance in New York to really jump in to comics in a big way. But, you know, somebody did what I wanted to do, and he's the guy that did it. And then this guy came around a little while later. He's the young guy. So he's, thank you. So, tell us something about your early days. You know, so Moon Knight was your first really big splash,
right?
And then New Mutants, and
well, yeah. I mean, when I started in doing comics, I'd already gone to art school, and I was also influenced. I mean, I loved comics as a kid. As a matter of fact, when I told my father I was 7 years old, I said, "This is what I'm going to be doing." And I think he started drinking a lot heavily, a lot more heavily after that. But so did I. But I think that had more to do with being Polish than being anything other than that. But I was also influenced by fine art and by illustration. And going to school in Newark, New Jersey, there was a lot of jazz as well. So a lot of the things that I was doing in art school involved collage, involved all-day painting sessions, wrote a lot of critiques, and it was really kind of an amazing environment for creativity and just social interaction, artists getting together and having grown up in the country and very much in isolation, you know, it's like if you mention Norman Rockwell and John Deere, I mean, people knew that John Deere made tractors. I think they kind of thought that Norman Rockwell was probably a competitor. I mean, that's how little they knew about art. And so I was really into comics, but I sort of got away. I mean, I really was heavily influenced by Neil Adams. And then I broke away from that in art school, and I started getting into guys like Rauschenberg, Motherwell, I mean, and, you know, fine artists. But a lot of the abstract expressionists, and even people like Andrew Wyeth, who to me is, even though he does very recognizable things, like snow flurries or his watercolors especially, even more so than his egg tempers, there's a very abstract quality to his stuff, and I found that I really got into the idea of abstraction. Yes. And getting into comics, I decided I would try to do Neil Adams because I figured that was my entree into it. But after about
also the printing technique was limited at the time. Yeah, the traditional comics was line art with flat color. And when you first came in, everything was pretty much still that way. You were one of the first guys, they started thinking, oh, you know what, we can get decent registration on photo separations now. And so you were there at the perfect time to come in.
And when they started allowing painted covers, I decided that I got into painting in art school, but I did it partly because sometimes I think of it in the way that Clint Eastwood wanted to get to directing. I just wanted to, you know, give it a go. I didn't want to be 90 years old and go, I was too afraid to paint. And so I just sort of jumped in with both feet.
But you mentioned the thing about Neil, when you first came into comics, what I'm saying is since you had already picked up these fine art and more experimental illustration influences, the fact that you were limited to line art coming into comics kind of set you back in that mentality.
Well, there was a lot of frustration. I actually got a lot of, part of what really inspired me or goaded me or infuriated me to move along was the fact that there was one thing I read that said, it looks like Bill Sienkiewicz has learned from Neil Adams, period. It was like, and I just sort of felt completely invisible. And I said, well, I'm going to try to do all the things that I found really interesting in terms of fine art. And even fashion illustration I loved. There were so many different things, and I felt I was doing a lot of this stuff in my sketchbook, and I was feeling completely uninspired and really kind of hamstrung. Because I felt like there were so many things that I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it in comics because I love the medium. And people, and editors were saying, and my wife at the time, you know, like, that's not what comics are. You can't do that. Just forget about it. And when the dam broke, and after I got really pissed about the comments and felt very, like,
who was that editor?
Well, it was a very tall gentleman, but he and I got along.
Well.
But all of my editors, when I started to do the painted stuff and the more experimental stuff, I was really heavy into Hunter Thompson, reading a lot of his stuff, and yeah, go figure, right? And Ralph Steadman, and I thought, this stuff is just perfect for, like, an influence for the whole Bear trilogy that Chris Claremont and I were doing for the New Mutants. It was at the tail end of Moon Knight when I did Hit It, which was sort of like doing things with a child perspective in terms of, you know, a child likes drawing. Because I felt like drawings that kids do tend to be more honest, and it's almost like a truth through the lie of the drawing. They get an emotional quality that isn't necessarily correctly drawn, like in the sort of sense that Gil Kane was such an amazing draftsman. But I found that Ralph Steadman's work had an emotional quality that felt right to the core of me. And I said, I want to try to do that kind of thing with the work. And I felt that the more I learned technique-wise, the more it helped with the language for producing things in comics. And, you know,
I think an example though, like you're talking about the childlike, is I always remember that just really, you know, I was so happy to see in Elektra, there was a scene in Elektra that shows her in her mother's womb, and he had the realistic drawing of the mother and the baby bubble, but then on top of the bubble was like Elektra as a child drawing herself, little stick figure self-portrait over the baby